Hey guys, welcome back. We're back with Season 9, Episode 46 of our weekly Q&A content. It's a video if you're on YouTube, it's a podcast if you're on sort of the RSS feed or the major podcasting platforms.
I thought you were going to just say, and it's a podcast if you're on the major podcasting platforms, because that would have been funnier. Like, I feel like there's like a little bit of a joke there. It's a podcast if you're listening to a podcast.
If this is a podcast right now, it's a podcast, and if it's a video on YouTube right now, then that's what that is. And you can figure out and let me know what type of thing it is. I don't have to tell you. You already know.
See, that felt like that joke was right there.
I don't even know what joke you're talking about. I don't get it.
Okay.
I made it, and I'm not even in on the joke, so I don't know exactly what's going on. But you have some stuff you want to say?
Sure. So we'll start off with the injustice stuff, because if you're watching this, I'm going to talk a little bit about process right now.
Yeah.
And so the last, few months, it feels like maybe almost a year, I've been trying to make sure that we have some footage that's relevant to what's happening in Injustice. Mm-hmm. Instead of our routine footage where it's just grinding. Because now that I've gotten enough Valorium alloy on 2 accounts to spend, like there's nothing else to spend it on, that was sort of the rate limiting step for everything. So I don't feel like I need to grind the Phantom Zone and the multiplayer the same way. So I've been experimenting with trying to make teams with each week's either multiplayer or challenge character, or sometimes both, or maybe even the gear.
Yeah.
And so this today is Suicide Squad Deadshot. And what you're seeing is some Suicide Squad Deadshot footage. But because of my process, I have to be prepared for Thursday. So I have to play around with the next team, which would include Jessica Cruz.
Yeah.
And so I started playing around with her, and she is so good.
Mm-hmm.
That, like I said, you're going to have Suicide Squad Deadshot footage. He's there with Suicide Squad Harley Quinn. It's a pretty good team. It's decent. I'm learning so much about stuff, and I'm learning a way that sticks more than on an intellectual basis where you're memorizing facts.
Yeah.
So I've always known that Jessica Cruz has those multi-hit combo enders.
Yeah.
What's cool about this is that when she tags in, and if she's got Master's Death Card when I tag in, I'm actually getting the combo ender probably like 80% of the time on the first tap combo.
Interesting.
And what's really cool about that is, so there's that tension between, so she's got really great combo enders. She does more than her share of basic damage on a tap combo because of so many extra hits. So the temptation is to make her a basic damage dealer. However, as a specialist, if you've got her with Master's Death Card, you can basically get a free tap combo in. Most of the time, I'm getting a combo ender.
Yeah.
And so I'm generating a whole bunch of power.
A huge amount.
Yeah. So what I did originally was, the footage you're probably going to see is the one that's sort of the ideal. But what I started with was John Stewart Green Lantern and Hawkgirl and Jessica Cruz, because John Stewart would give her the Green Lantern boost to do more hits on her special 2. Mm-hmm. And he would add something because he gives her protection when her health is below 10%.
Yeah.
It's not bad. Makes her a little hardier. Makes her harder to knock out. The problem I found with John Stewart Green Lantern, though, is that his special 1 is not ranged. And when I say it's not ranged, so all the Green Lanterns do that sort of battering ram thing where it's almost like it is a battering ram, right? So they just throw that thing and it goes a distance.
Yeah.
John Stewart's just doesn't hit if they're far away. I don't know what's up with that.
So it just flings and then disappears against them, and then nothing happens.
Right. So I'm playing him as a a gear stripper, and he works that way because when you load him out like that, it has to work. It just does. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter if the special 1 hits on the one that's stripping the gears, but it's a pain because it would be nice if it, did a little bit of damage, made a bit of difference. So what you're seeing that's a bit more effective is Red Lantern Hal Jordan. So he's better because his special 1 hits, it's not ranged. But the funny thing is that now I know on a gut level, because I feel betrayed, is that Red Lantern Hal Jordan does not count as a Green Lantern for Jessica Cruz's passive. And okay, so, on a technicality, that's entirely fair.
Because this is a Red Lantern, not a Green Lantern.
Right. I get that. But it's still Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
And I think, who is it? There's Sinestro Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Counts as a Green Lantern. And I feel like Hal Jordan should count more towards Jessica Cruz. I know, because it's a Hal Jordan connection, but I think the Green Lantern connection is probably, well, not probably, it's definitely more important.
Yeah.
So this is an example, I think, of how when you play the characters, there's something that you learn about how they play more than you would than just on an intellectual level if somebody just told you facts about each character.
There's an experiential learning to it that is almost impossible to just sort of predict in a vacuum.
Right.
And that's why we do experiments with stuff, right? Instead of just thinking about things on their sort of from first principles and then imagining how stuff works.
Right. Oh, I should point out too, the other thing is because it's Red Lantern Hal Jordan and he comes with power, I don't have to give him Master's Death card. So that's how I know with Jessica Cruz how good it is, her tap combo with Master's Death card, why I'm getting the combo under so much when I wasn't when she was just tagging with only Tantu Tobin, not Master's Death card. So yeah, I love this team, and I'm maybe potentially jumping the gun because I think I'm going to stick some Jessica Cruz footage on here because she is that good. It's just that much fun.
And so that's what you're watching. What you guys are watching.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, it's only been 6 minutes, so you're probably. I'm going to start with letting you have some Suicide Squad Deadshot footage because it's a good team. I mean, it's not so much, I guess, that the team is good as this particular gear loadout for this kind of team composition that you could really swap out different characters if you wanted to, as long as they did not have a really crappy special one.
So there we go. But you've also you wanted to talk about something that you've been watching, which is there's a show recently
yes,
that you've been really enjoying.
So I grew up in the era of the first Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
So I was young. I was less than 10 when I saw the first trilogy.
Yeah.
And I imprinted on it pretty hard. Like, that's one of my Star Wars, which was originally not A New Hope. It was just Star Wars. Excuse me, I'm coughing a lot. So it's back then it was re-released, I think, in 1978 with a bunch of toys, and they even gave you like little pamphlets with all the toys and stuff. Like that was like the perfect storm. Love that movie. I appreciate it in a way that is not entirely justified by, I think, how good it is in some ways.
Yeah, it's like how like one of my favorite movies when I was younger was the live-action Scooby-Doo movie.
They were pretty good, though.
Well, you know, but whether or not they were good, I could not tell you if they were good at all.
Right.
Right? I loved them. I loved them dearly, but their quality is a separate factor, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't invalidate my 7-year-old opinion if they were terrible, right? It would still be. At
one point, I gotta think about it first about whether it's worth telling that story. I think it's a funny story, and I would like to share it, but I don't know if this is sort of the appropriate venue for it.
I don't even know what you're talking about, but
the story about how we ended up watching Scooby-Doo and why it became your favorite movie.
I just want whatever.
Anyways, so, but it's got a place where in sort of that the pantheon of movies where it's a lot of people's favorite because it did a lot of things that were new at the time.
Yeah,
it was a compelling story, but it lacked a bit of depth and realism and being grounded in a way that Andor has. And I love Andor. This is the best non-original trilogy Star Wars that I have ever seen. Yeah. I'm almost through the end, and it is compelling in a way that I did not expect.
So that's really cool because there's really good media, and I feel like I have this kind of perception of Star Wars and Marvel and some of those, you know, the new Jurassic Park kind of movies, and a lot of stuff like that, where most of them, I think, don't rise above good enough.
Right.
And some of them can do some interesting stuff, right? But for the vast majority of them, and there's exceptions, every once in a while one comes along that can be really cool and do something really new or interesting.
I think Marvel has the best chance of that only because what you're doing is taking so much different work from different writers and artists, so that it's not really like one particular vision that you're trying to branch out of, like say Jurassic Park. Like those are clearly meant to capitalize on that intellectual property.
But for the vast majority of them, they are enjoyable, but relatively, I don't want to say forgettable, but like you get through them, and a lot of them don't do too much special. They're too big to sort of do anything except play it mostly safe.
Right, they're not trying to be meaningful in a way. They're trying to be entertaining.
Yeah, and that's fine, and there's a place for that. But so it's cool, and I think one of the things that's been happening with sort of like this streaming stuff, and when there's like different approaches to sort of IP, right, where you can be really sort of protective of it and really careful with it, and I think that's when you run into sort of making really safe bets with something. But then there's when you have a big IP to go, okay, if we have something with this IP, it means that it's going to get a lot more attention than something that's unattached to anything.
Right.
So we can afford to be weird with it.
Right.
And it's not as big of a risk. And then maybe we'll hit on something great. And obviously, you know, that's like...
That happens very rarely, though.
Yeah. It's an oversimplification. But I think it's cool that there's interesting stuff happening with things that we're already familiar with, and it feels like there's a lot of stuff happening right now that's like sequels. There's not as much like independent stuff, and we're seeing also like a lot of, you know, shows and streaming shows being like canceled after like one season right now, or like partway through their second season and stuff, and like seeing sort of the money get funneled, all the money and attention and everything get funneled into like the handful of shows that are ridiculously popular.
Yes.
And then a bunch of really good stuff just getting totally killed early. And so it's cool that in all that there's still sort of space for cool, fun, interesting stories to be told where you don't expect them to be. And I think in one sense it's almost more surprising to me when a Star Wars thing manages to do that, as opposed to something that just is sort of smaller or a new IP or coming out of nowhere or whatever. Because I think those ones, you know, you expect sometimes they will be really weird, but you don't expect that from something like Star Wars anymore.
What was the last Star Wars trilogy? The one was, you know, the one that comes...
The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens.
Last Jedi, so whatever.
I remember when I was watching Force Awakens that it felt like a rehash of the original Star Wars for plot points and just general like stuff, and not necessarily even done in a particularly interesting way. I mean, it was great that it was Star Wars.
Yeah, it felt perfectly good enough.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch the movies that came after it. I am assuming they were also... I saw people saying that they weren't very good.
Rogue One
that
was
they were
good.
okay. Rogue One was pretty good. Rogue One was cool. But that a lot of them were like mediocre and that they didn't get very good reviews. Right. And the other thing that's so hard now is I think that so many people... There's a really... strong sort of filtering how you view movies through like a political lens that's been happening, where people will choose different pieces of content to really focus on for something sort of almost entirely outside of like how good the piece of media is, where they go, this is too woke or this is too whatever, right? And people sort of form opinions on the content like before it's even out. And I know that like Star Wars has been a victim of that with the most recent trilogy, where there was a lot of people who made it like sort of like a culture point, right? And like a fight that, you know, they made like a stormtrooper black and all this other stuff. And so there was this whole conversation that I think muddies the water a lot when you're looking at how people feel about something, where it becomes really hard to tell if somebody liked or didn't like a movie on its own merits, or if it had to be part of something bigger.
Wow. And the funny thing is, complaining that Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever is woke is just like such a funny argument, when I mean,
they were always left leaning.
They were always counterculture, counter establishment, counter whatever. Like they were meant to be. I mean, it's the rebellion, please. Like it was anti-establishment.
And like the Sith and stuff were supposed to be like America. If you look at like reviews, right? I forget what it was. It was like the guerrilla like fighters were supposed to be like representative of like the Vietnam War and stuff, and so like the
unwinnable war.
Yeah, and so then it was explicitly the Empire was America.
So it clearly, I mean, I don't mind that people took something different away from it, but clearly the people that are trying to make it like somehow this is new were not watching, or just did not understand what they were watching the first time around. It's
like how the Matrix has become, and the language of the Matrix has become such a like a dog whistle and such like a right-wing talking point, when it's like the exact opposite of the sort of creators and their politics and their viewpoints.
Yeah. But love Andor. I can't recommend it enough. You haven't seen it, right?
Have not.
Yeah,
I've heard good things, but I have not seen it.
I would recommend it because it's definitely not that kind of a story. It's much more layered and nuanced and complex, the same way that Star Wars was really simplistic. Like, you've seen Star Wars, right?
I have seen Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really like, there's not a lot of nuance in Star Wars. Andor, totally, very, very compelling. I can't wait to see. I think I've got maybe 2 more episodes left.
Okay, so there's a recommendation. So let's get into the first comment of the week. This one comes from Cameron107. And so this is sort of a continuation of when we were previously talking about block breaking and the math around it.
Right.
So they say the math around block breaking becomes even more complicated when you take into account gears like Enchantress and Master's Death Cart, both of which do count towards Arkham Harley's passive. And when it comes to a character like Arkham Knight, the Arkham Knight, the unblockable chance becomes downright impossible to calculate because the hits from his drone strike on his special 2 count as well. As far as taking advantage of matchmaking is concerned, it kind of depends on what promotions your other characters are at. My Arkham Knight Batgirl is E3, my Arkham Harley Quinn is Elite 1, and my Arkham Origins Deathstroke is at Elite 10 with his damage max augmented. I normally don't like teams this unbalanced, but I've made an exception here, because Arkham Knight Batgirl can revive your main damage dealer, so it doesn't feel like you're putting all your eggs in one basket, even though you kind of are. And my initial point was that for people who really like these kinds of teams, Arkham Origins Deathstroke and Injustice 2 Superman are really good, because their built-in stat increase can make a team even more unbalanced. That being said, I completely agree that Arkham Knight Batman is better in an Arkham team. He can play around Astro Harness and his other health threshold passives very easily with his special 2. Or sorry, not his other, and just other health threshold passives.
Right.
With Deathstroke, you sort of have to punch through it, which isn't ideal. Batman also has specific counters to so many matchups, which make life a lot easier, and he can be a special 2 specialist without Master's Death Card, meaning that you can have another character with the gear-shattering setup of Master's Death Cart, Claw of Horus. I was reading ahead. The problem is there's too many acronyms. So I'm reading ahead and trying to make sure I don't trip myself up, and I'm combining words. So Master's Death Cart, Claw of Horus, and a damage over time gear. All in all, this is a much better team composition, even if Batman's damage is slightly lower.
Right. So one thing I actually like about the Arkham team is Catwoman. I want to talk about this, but it just occurred to me. So it was clearly percolating in my head what you said about how when you've got an IP, one of the things that you can do is you can try something different, know that you're going to get an audience for it, and have the chance to make something really spectacular. You know what that's like?
What?
That's like nepotism. It's like entertainment families, and I don't know why it occurred to me. It's we've watched Stranger Things together. You know is the character named Robin? The one that is the scoop, the ice cream.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So Robin is played by Maya Hawke.
Yeah.
Who's the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. And it's very much like that because while a big name might get you in the door, if you don't perform, if you don't deliver, you're done. Like, it gets you in the door. It doesn't keep getting you jobs, but it gives you a chance that most people don't get.
And it also, if you're related to somebody with that much access to resources, it lets you keep trying and not have failure mean that you're like starving or homeless or, you know, out of options. You don't have to be desperate, right? You can sort of, you have the resources to be protected even if, you know, you're taking risks on something like, you know, acting.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is that we see this all the time when it comes to people.
Yeah.
I feel like we see it very rarely when it comes to franchises. And I think that if we took this approach more with franchises, the same approach, we'd have the potential to see so much more interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if Disney is listening to us,
if
I'm sure they Warner
are.
Brothers is listening to us, then please, because they're not.
This is your pitch to the executives at Warner Brothers.
Let some of these creatives have a bit more a freer reign and the chance to do something really interesting and spectacular. This is what happened with YTT. What's his name?
Taika Waititi.
Taika Waititi.
Taika.
Okay, I can't. Listen, I apologize.
What happened with Taika Waititi with what?
With because when he came on board, he was not known for superhero movies or mainstream movies, and he did, I think it was Thor?
Ragnarok, yeah.
Yeah.
But then people are saying that Thor Love and Thunder was pretty terrible.
That's okay. Doesn't mean he's going to make all good movies.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that if you take a chance, you have the chance, there's a possibility of something really interesting that's way better than it could have been.
Yeah.
And so same with James Gunn too, right? I don't think James Gunn was doing a bunch of mainstream movies before he did Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think that's the kind of thing that I wish franchises would take the same risk that they do with people based on... so you've got the connection and the name that gives you the opportunity, but then you have to prove yourself. Yeah. And that's, I don't know.
It's like the Suicide Squad was really good. And then what was the spin-off show? What's the name of that guy? The American
Peacemaker.
guy? Peacemaker. Like those were both really cool.
Yeah.
And, to be fair, it's not like, DC was putting Batman, right? And letting them do something that sort of weird and out there with like a really exceptionally well-known property.
Yeah.
But like that was cool. Yeah. Right. And I think even just having it be like a DC thing. Right. Was close enough to sort of big. And I think the other thing that's happened with superhero movies now is that I think it is less of whether or not you know the superhero and more of like, oh, this is like one of the big Marvel movies, or oh, this is one of the big DC ones. Right. Because they've done a bunch of times like people who most people probably don't know. Right. Except for comic book fans, and then made you like them, like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? They weren't taking a big risk on like a big property that was everybody's like favorite. It wasn't like Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, like one of the ones everyone knew. I had no clue who the Guardians of the Galaxy were, but why it mattered is it was one of the big Marvel movies. Right.
So let's talk about this Arkham team. So Deathstroke is interesting. So I think Cameron's point is really good. That when you're talking about an unbalanced team, sometimes the passives don't matter as much because the teammates aren't contributing as much. Yeah. So it makes a lot of sense that for an unbalanced team, Arkham Origins, Deathstroke, and Injustice 2 Superman are going to be really good because of their hidden stats that come from their passive that aren't taken into account in matchmaking. I'll tell you what though, for an Arkham team, my favorite. So Arkham Knight Batgirl is non-negotiable. Absolutely right again about how the fact that Arkham Knight Batgirl can save a teammate once from getting knocked out. It's not as good as, say, coming back with some health, because you're going to come back with 1 health unless you've done some healing. Yeah. So you're going to be vulnerable. So when you drop back in, you need to really be able to do some damage. A lot of times that means it has to be a special, because if you tag in with 1 health and you're going to try to do a basic combo, I feel like there's a half a chance that you're going to get knocked out before you do anything. Yeah.
But it is a chance to sort of screw up a little bit. Not a lot. But you can screw up a little bit more than you would otherwise and then not, lose.
Right, but I would not want Arkham Knight Batgirl to be the weakest on the team because, all right, so this is E10, E3, and E1, only because part of what makes her so good is that potential to do some damage when she saves her teammate, because she's stunning. She's stunning, like, not attractive stunning, but she's stunning like she's actually going to stun the opponent. Yeah. And when they're stunned, there's a real opportunity to stack Necron Scythe, Cloak of Destiny, and really boost your damage. But if your stats are so low, too low compared to the opponent, then it's not going to be effective enough before she gets knocked out, and then Arkham Origins Deathstroke comes back in with 1 health. Yeah. Arkham Harley Quinn is interesting. She gives a health boost, and she gives unblockable on special 2. Arkham Origins Deathstroke, I think his special 2 is really good, and it's better than average, but his special 1 is much better than average because of how you can get crit boost without any crit gears on a special 1 if you get it to 200%. Yeah. So he's really interesting because then you can sort of optimize the gears in a way that you can't with other people where you're trying to do 2 different jobs at once. So the main problem I see with Deathstroke is that the knockout potential, with a few exceptions, for most characters comes on special 2. He does a really good special 1 damage, but usually it's not enough to knock them out. Yeah. And I actually like Arkham Knight Catwoman better, only because with her damage over time not rinsing, she can do it even against an opponent that tags out or against an opponent that's got Astro Harness, as long as you get the bleed in, and it will eventually bleed them out. So it's going to do enough damage even after being blocked, even after whatever. Whereas with Arkham Origins Deathstroke, you're going to need, say, Arkham Harley Quinn to get the unblockable special 2, or you're going to need to do more than one special 1.
Yeah.
So it's been a matter of playing around with it that I've come to this conclusion, but it's super, super fun to watch them. Like, just their health. It's like it doesn't. It's like a cup with a hole at the bottom. It just sort of drips right out, and all you have to do is survive long enough to watch it happen.
That's a Pythagoras.
Oh, is that the one where if you
fill it up too much, it all drains out?
Right, because of it, like capillary action, and it pulls it out to, It's like the way toilet flushes. It's how toilets work. Did you know that? It's taking the principle that we use. So when you've got a toilet, so it pulls, every toilet has that little kink, that little sort of S.
Yeah.
And so how it works is there's water sitting there, and it doesn't go above the level, but when you fill it enough, all of it rises, and the part that you don't see that rises enough pulls the fluid out of the toilet, and as it pulls it, it's all suction pulling the rest of it because it's all one continuous sort of mass of water. Yeah. So that's
how some toilets work, I'm assuming, because I think in like airplane toilets that suction is so aggressive that there's no way that's just like.
That's true. Land toilets. So most land toilets have that little S. So that's why they pour water into the bowl, and somehow that gives you like a whoomp, all of a sudden.
And then there's also those squat toilets that are just big holes in the ground. And
or outhouses.
Yeah. What are the
porta potties?
Porta potties. Yeah.
Those don't work.
Porta potties are just outhouses, but plastic and at festivals.
So one of those things. So I don't know if I've told you this story before. When I was young, I had to go to day camp.
Yeah.
When I was young, my parents did not have the most enlightened idea of nutrition, and it was convenient for them to give us lunch, usually with a can of off-brand pop.
Yeah.
And so the off-brand pop that they used to buy us, again, not healthy, it was cheap, was the grape.
It's not Crush, it's Crash.
So the grape stuff, and I liked it going down enough, but there were times when, it's hot, it's in the summer, you're running around and stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have as much experience with knowing, hey, what agrees with me and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So there were more than a few times where I would be vomiting after having had lunch.
Gross.
It was pretty gross. I don't do that anymore. So, but where would you vomit? You go to the toilet.
Yeah. Oh.
Day camp, it's not a toilet. It's an outhouse. So
that's terrible.
So you have an idea but at least it's dark. All you're really presented with is maybe something that's close enough to the surface where there's a light shining down on it. But most of it is just foul smelling.
Yeah.
Except on the last day of day camp.
Yeah.
As a joke, some of the counselors had one of the other counselors in the outhouse and tipped it over with them in it, and then we could see the whole pit. Of everything
underneath it. Wait, so I've never been entirely clear on this. It's always felt kind of like a bag of holding or a TARDIS, where it's like bigger on the inside, on the outside, where this actual space. What happens inside the sort of toilet part of an outhouse is unclear to me. They dig down for it. Because it can't be that wide. Otherwise, the outhouse there's going to be no place for the outhouse to rest on. Yeah, that makes sense. So they dig down for it, and then they like coat the outside edge so that you're not just leaking sewage or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I tell you, because
you saw it briefly when you were a child,
my impression of it wasn't so much, I wonder how they put this together.
Yeah.
As much as, oh my God.
That's disgusting.
That is what I've been facing down each time I have been unwell.
Yeah.
And trying to find a appropriate place for what was going to happen.
Yeah. That's disgusting. And so what you're saying is did that put you off grape soda?
That put me off grape soda.
Yeah.
And outhouses and camping, all of it. It was nasty.
That sounds pretty foul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. Spoiler alert, it was totally foul.
Yeah.
So how do we get on this?
I don't know.
Where was the takeoff point on that?
I don't know. I really don't.
We were talking about flushing, and toilets.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the cup, Pythagoras
Yeah,
cup.
Pythagoras cup and the greedy cup, and then draining all
Draining
of their...
Arkham Knight Catwoman. I don't think you can really lose. I mean, Arkham Knight Batgirl is one of the spectacular super teammates if you can take advantage of her passive. There's some that are really top tier. Like, I think Arkham Knight Batgirl is a top tier. Remember we were talking last time? Hawkgirl is top tier. Arkham Knight Batgirl is top tier. New 52 Wonder Woman is top tier. Not necessarily because of what they can do, but because of what they add to the game. Batgirl, plain Batgirl is top tier. And you have to look at them in the context of a team.
Yeah.
And I think you have to look at them in context of using their ideal loadout. Because if you don't, then all you get are people who have no passive, like no sort of world. What do you call that when their category? You know, like what's
passive?
Red Sun, like
oh,
that
like
kind
universe
of,
or
a
whatever.
universe. That's it. A universe advantage.
Yeah.
Then all you're looking at is individual characters, and that's not actually how we play the game.
Yeah.
So I think Arkham Knight Batgirl is absolutely 100% top tier, and I would be so Arkham Knight Batgirl. I mean, the third one besides Arkham Knight Catwoman, you could almost stick anybody, and it would still be a good team as long as you gear them properly. But Arkham Knight Catwoman is so much fun because she makes opponents look like toilets. That's how when their health bleeds out after she's done a damage over time special. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I didn't even realize how far off we had gotten.
Yeah, I normally I'm not awake enough. Normally I'm sleep deprived enough that sometimes the connections
That you would have just
I would just forgotten where we come from. But it's interesting because we just saw when I was just on a trip. You weren't there, and I saw there's a place selling these cups, and I was looking at it and I thought, oh, yeah, that's interesting. That's exactly like a toilet. It is taking advantage of the exact same principle that a toilet does.
It's funny because I knew how a Pythagoras cup worked, but I did not know how toilets worked. So I would not have been able to put that together. Looking at a Pythagoras cup, I would have been like, oh, that's like a Pythagoras cup, because that's what it is. And I'm not as well versed in sort of the subtleties of toilet technology.
It's connections, baby. It's like Maya Hawke and Star Wars and Andor.
Yeah. So a Pythagoras cup is a cup that is a trick that you pull on people, and what those counselors did to the other counselors in the outhouse was also a trick. But it was
not a Pythagoras cup trick.
But if it was in a normal toilet, it would have been the same technology.
Oh, that connection would have been
really. It was really low tech though.
This is like Inception, where it's like mirror, reflection, 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 reflection.
I don't think it's a lot like Inception. There's that There's that really long copy pasta about what Waluigi is. When you said reflection or reflection, I didn't think about Inception. I thought about, because they say Mario, right? Luigi is like a reflection of Mario.
Yes.
A little different, like a funhouse mirror.
Yes.
And Wario is like an evil reflection of Mario.
Yes.
And so then what is Waluigi? He's a reflection of a reflection. He's evil reflection of...
He's Mario.
Of Luigi.
He's Mario.
No, but so that he's a reflection of a reflection, and that he's and the sort of the gist of it, because I wish I had the text in my head, but I don't have that kind of memory. I would feel maybe a little bad if I did have it memorized, but that he's a reflection of a reflection. He's supposed to be the everyman, and that then I think it devolves into some like socialist talking points where he's supposed to be like a representation of the proletariat or something like that. But that's neither here nor there.
No.
So Inception was not, and I'm maybe even a little ashamed to say that a copy pasta about Waluigi was the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about that.
That's cool.
It's doors and windows.
It is funny though, right? Because of the way we're raised. I mean, a lot of times people talk about generations and it feels very artificial.
Yeah.
But this is one of those examples where it really does make sense, where our cultural touchstones are completely different. And probably part of the reason why I think big age gaps in relationships are so difficult is because when you're missing those cultural touchstones, then a lot of times you're lacking the familiarity, and maybe that's good for some relationships, but it's not as sustaining for one where you expect to have somebody be a partner instead of just like somebody that you hang out with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that most people have this cultural touchstone of Waluigi, but I do have the text of the meme.
Oh, okay. I want to hear it. It's good.
Waluigi is the ultimate example of an individual shaped by the signifier. Waluigi is a man only seen in mirror images. Lost in a hall of mirrors, he is a reflection of a reflection of a reflection. You start with Mario, the wholesome all-Italian plumbing Superman. You reflect him to create Luigi, the same thing but slightly less. You invert Mario and create Wario. Mario turns septic and libertarian. Then you reflect the inversion in the reflection. You create a being who can only exist in reference to others. Waluigi is the true nowhere man. Without the other characters he reflects, inverts, and parodies, he has no reason to exist. Waluigi's identity only comes from what and who he isn't. Without a wider frame of reference, he is nothing. He is not his own man. In a world where our identities are shaped by our warped relationships to brands and commerce, we are all Waluigi.
Okay.
And this comes from We Waluigi, a postmodern analysis of Waluigi by Frank Ribery.
So, Waluigi's identity only comes from what and who he isn't. Okay.
Yeah.
In silence, the word. Only in darkness, light. Bright, the hawk's flight on the empty sky.
I don't know what that is.
That is a poem from Wizard of Earthsea.
Oh.
Creation of Ea, Ursula Le Guin. And that made me think of exactly that when it's that contrast, right? Like that's an idea that a lot of writers have used before, but I don't know why it struck me so hard. And I think, wow, this has got to be one of my favorite episodes where we're making all these connections. And I feel so, you know what it's like? Yeah. It's like when you're playing the game and you've been playing it and grinding it for a while, and all of a sudden you come upon a combination of a teammate where you become so much more engaged and you're sort of into what's happening. This is what today's episode feels exactly like. Thank you very much.
I'm just I forgot how funny the line Wario Mario turned septic and libertarian was. I forgot how good that was.
That is good.
And you know, I think a lot of the value that I provided in this episode is just finding and repeating somebody else's content, but I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I think this is probably a good place to end it off for the week.
It is. You know what? And as a bonus to viewers, how about I just stick in more footage at the end, even after we finish talking? Because this is I love Jessica Cruz as a teammate, and this team is really good.
Yeah. Shout out to Eliza, Septic and Libertarian Caton. She is a reflection of a reflection. I forgot to write it, but I think that turned out very well, so that was very funny. This one was brought to you by a postmodern analysis of Waluigi. And we'd also like to give a huge thank you to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
And that would be Bomble Ben, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon, supporting us at the highest tier last word, Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier, Drew Chapman, Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, Eddydoo, and Hoshi127 supporting us on the credited level, and Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pabu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isra at the gratitude level. And I do want to point out, because we're getting close at some point, we talked about this a little bit, even before we get to the point where we're saying this is past the pandemic, I want to point out that the people who are still currently supporting us are Drew Chapman, Michael DeVries, Irvin Ruiz, and Hoshi127, who are still on board with us at this moment. So not at some point
you get a double thank you.
You get a double thank you right now because you are current, and I just want to point that out because I do value what they've been doing to encourage us to keep on doing this. Because maybe it doesn't mean the same to you because it's you're not, I guess, in our heads and part of this process. But I feel way more motivated to have kept this up for the last few years because of our patrons.
Yeah. Even if the money itself is not like enough for this to be like a living for us, the thing that it signifies is significant all the same.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for your support, and thanks so much to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.